Nightmare Box presents The Art of Wargaming. I'm Yog Malark.
And I'm Onishiro.
And welcome back, sir. I am so happy to have you back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
It was lovely to have Kaji and Juniper on the show. I think they both brought some excellent insight to the topics we were talking about. But yeah, you're in the picture with me. So
Thanks, dog.
yes. And you just have this flow to you. You just like, I don't know, you just bring this inexorably cool to my straight-lacedness.
Whoa.
Yes.
Fan the flames, good sir. Gee whiz. Well, I mean, you know I have nothing but the same to say for you.
See? And maybe that's it. Maybe they just didn't praise me enough. I think that might be it. But Oni's back, and that is excellent. And we are here to talk about on the march, being on the march. And we're taking this to mean two kind of separate things. One, being in a transitory state on the field of battle, or having your units be in a transitory state, which is moving between places on a field of battle. And also to say, how it is literally. I mean...
Truly.
Being on the march is a huge thing. We discussed last time that logistics play a huge part. Many wars, many battles are won and lost on logistics, purely. And so being on the march may be a very perilous part of this because you have a lot of things to keep worrying about, as we'll see in the super secret battle that we'll be talking about later. Yes. Yes, we're keeping it a secret till the very end because I want to see if you, the listeners, can guess before we get to the end. No cheating. Yes. So, we got a couple of things to talk to you about before we get to that point, though. The first one is, before we get into this chapter, I want to talk about how, if you're reading along at home, you're going to notice that we've reorganized the information somewhat. I found that at least taking the ideas and putting them in a little bit of a different order matched the flow of the way we kind of discuss things a little bit better. We're still going to be using some of the same language and the same ideas that Sun Tzu uses, but you might notice that it's out of order. That is why.
Forgive us.
Forgive us, yes.
But I agree. I think it's a good change.
I thought it just made more sense in terms of just like the progression of where you're going. You know, you start in your camp, then you end up on the field.
Right, which situation you're going to come into first.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so first off, we want to talk about a little bit the Gladiators, this high school program that Oni and I help run. And Oni was there today. You have some words for me. You wanted to discuss some progress report on the students.
Oh, it's getting hairy. It's wild. Like the last couple weeks, I've been a little bit rusty. I can't, I've noticed I can't get away with certain things. Just that kind of situation.
Right.
When you're dealing with like a young group that doesn't have a lot of experience, you can really mess with them in certain ways that are, you can't mess with other fighters in that manner.
Right, like certain stancing that would be punished by somebody who is faster.
Easily, yeah. And now we're definitely to that point where even the newest of fighters won't fall victim to that kind of thing.
Oh, they ain't putting up with your BS no
No,
more.
not even a tiny little bit, and I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. The veteran fighters this time, before our last group before this, had a very relaxed, like casual fighting. They just had fun, and they didn't really have a very strong senior group, year 4 group to fight against.
Right.
So they built thusly. They built just off of their own style and then their mentor's style that they learn things from, but not from like any skilled peers. But this run, the juniors and seniors are all battle hardened. They've been fighting those guys for a long time and building off a decent, group, and now they are absolutely fantastic. And for where they're at, it's incredible. And it shows from the bottom up. The newest fighters are good. They're coming in, having a hard time just like anyone starting does, but they're picking up the basics and fundamentals super quick, and they're like, it's clean.
Well, what I'm from hearing from you and the overall coordinator is that our older students have actually picked up the habit of teaching the younger students a lot of technique.
Yes, yeah. A specific hard-shelled reptile is absolutely doing phenomenal. He's running 12 shots. He's fighting with people off the field. He's showing people techniques like selflessly. It's fantastic.
That's what you want to see as a teacher, for sure.
Yep. And yeah, and this week, one of the first rounds we had, one of our fighters, he's a little on the taller side, like 6'1", 6'2". He's a tall kid.
Yep, yeah.
And I feel like tall fighters suffer a little bit at the beginning from like the long limb syndrome.
We do. Yeah.
It's a strength, but it's hard to understand exactly how to take advantage of it. He was clumsy at first. His first year was a little rough for him. But this year, I saw him line up, lay on. He threw so many absolutely stellar, clean 12-shot style, free end combo. No intentional 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, but just wham, 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 wham. Every shot was decisive, clean, and just absolutely gorgeous.
Now that is so good to hear, and I am glad to hear he is progressing faster than I did. Because like you were saying, tall fighters seem to have you assume, because you get that extra reach, that it's actually going to be a huge boon for the fight itself. But often when you're sitting there and you're engaged with an opponent, that same reach, excuse me, applies to the rest of your body as well. So you're actually a much larger target, especially if you're standing up straight. Frog throat. So yeah, I can absolutely understand why he struggled, and all you tall fighters out there who might be struggling with the same thing, this idea of not being able to quite get all your limbs and your torso under control, I would recommend practicing the horse stance a lot more, because the idea is to get low.
Solid grounding.
I like to get as low, like eye level, with my opponent's eye level. So if you're fighting against a very short fighter, you're going to need to have some good thigh strength. But it keeps them from being able to use that much more of your body as a weak zone. I have a good friend, Dyer, who walked under me. I think I've told this story before, but when she first moved to the realm, she just would hold up her shield basically kind of above her head and walk under my shots and walk under my threat range and kill me. And she just did this for weeks, months, and I was so frustrated until I realized my height wasn't actually an advantage.
Truly. Yeah, it's like a coiled snake. You know,
Yep.
If you keep that low stance grounded, you're ready to strike and let loose your range. But if you're hanging tall, it's like a traveling snake instead. You're not prepared for a counterattack. You're not prepared for someone to reach out on you.
In order to get that good kinetic energy, you first have to have that coiled potential energy.
The spring.
That's a great image. That was a great image. No, I like that.
Thank you. Inspired by your words.
No, and so it's good to hear that they're teaching. It's good to hear that there's improvement happening. The teaching these kids is very, very, very rewarding, and it's good to see them growing and becoming better members of the community in the process.
That's the whole point, yeah.
Now, if we can just get them to come out to the darn Stygia field, that would be the next step.
Some of them make it out for sure.
Yeah, I do see them from time to time.
The hard-backed reptile.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I had a great time on Sunday. Totally ate a red to the face.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh, he's such a tank though. Man, I've never. He just ignores damage. He does not care.
Well, one of the things that Belegarth is really good about, I think, is teaching you that you're not made of glass. Because, when you first start getting hit, you're not used to it. Nobody's used to getting impacted, even by a foam weapon. It is often startling, jarring.
Especially when it's at such high force.
Yeah, especially at such a young level. A lot of kids, they come out there their first time, and we are the first adults to ever engage them in combat.
Yep.
And so there's that to get over at first. There's this whole like they're not used to it idea. But after they get over it, after they get over the fact that no, you're even if it stings a little bit, which often a good shot does, it's not going to hurt you. It's a safe piece of equipment if it's been checked, which we do regularly. And after they do that, they can grow, and suddenly the flinching. I mean, once you can get past the flinching, the idea of closing your eyes, when your opponent is throwing a shot at you. I mean, it seems ridiculous on this end of things, but like I remember for longer than I probably should have. I definitely flinched anytime anybody threw a shot.
Yeah, took the thought out of my mind, the words out of my mouth. Yeah, that's like the biggest hurdle for people at first. You know, you spend time as a kid stick fighting,
right?
You know, and you're running like really honestly, most of the time those kids are running 20%, just because they don't know how to swing a sword. They're just doing it. They're just having fun, you know.
And they're trying not to hurt each other most of the time.
Most of the time. Well, you know, and then some people have that friend, you know, and that's where you build those kinds of like reactions too. You know, you're playing with all your homies, having a good old 15-20% time, and then here comes Steve. He likes to roll 75%, 80% for no reason.
Nobody likes Steve.
And then everyone's like, whoa, dude, I don't know about stick fighting anymore. And that builds that, like, flinch. You're young, you have a scary incident, you know, somebody gets smacked in the face really hard.
Dude, it's like you're reading a piece out of my own personal biography, because when I was younger, I was the oldest of my, I'll say, quote-unquote, siblings, because it was myself, my younger brother, and then my younger cousin David and my younger cousin Carrie, who were really similar. We were all raised very similarly and very near to each other, and so they're very much siblings to me.
Yeah.
And we were doing the stick fighting thing, as most young people do, and I was attempting to impart to my younger cousin that he shouldn't be trying to dodge a thrown stick, but he should try to block it instead. And after 2 or 3 failed attempts, because he would just dodge out of the way, which, honestly, in hindsight, BT dubs, David, you were absolutely right. Dodging is always better than blocking if you can do it, just because, that you don't get hit at all. But
you were at that young age that you were looking for the skill check.
I was, and so I hollered at him to block it, and he did, except that the point then, like, got a little bit of extra force, and I thought it got him in the eye. Because suddenly he goes over, he's clutching his eye area, and I'm like, oh, no. I've just taken my cousin's eye out, and I threw the stick. I told him to hold still. There is no way I am escaping this punishment. My parents will kill me. His parents will kill me. Like it was just,
you're getting double jeopardy.
And then he took his hands away from his eye, and thank God it was just like near the eye, just kind of down on that bony ridge, and it was still bleeding pretty good, but his eye was fine.
Good for you to not get in that kind of trouble, and awesome for your cousin to not lose his eye.
He's the best man at the wedding, too. So
excellent.
Yeah, we're solid. All you got to do is hit somebody in the eye with a stick, and you're solid for life. It's a rule.
But there it is. That's how it's born.
Yep.
You have that realization that damage is real.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, oh, shit. Excuse my French.
We try so hard. We try so hard not to swear, but both Oni and I swear a decent amount in real life. Not vindictively, it's just a catharsis thing, you know, but we try to keep it clean for the show, but we know that you guys probably enjoy the occasional sword sound that Kristen dubs over the swear words that get through, so thank you, Kristen, and thank you guys as well. But getting over that first shock, getting over those shocks of even controlled violence being committed nearby can be hard. Not even just for kids. Like there's a lot of adults that come by and they're like, "Oh, look, it's a LARP," and then they get involved and they're like, "Oh, this is combat. These nerds are hitting us," and it becomes a totally different reality for them.
That is most often the situation when people come in with that attitude, like, oh, sure, yeah, dude, yeah, yeah, I can swing stick, yeah, and you're like, okay, oh, wait a second.
I mean, I also think there's something to it that when anybody within hearing distance hears somebody who's come up to try it speaking like that, we all salivate just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh, was that a challenge?
Yeah.
Did he bite his thumb, sir?
I do believe he bit his thumb at you.
So yeah, so with the gladiators, I always applaud them because they're taking on a daunting task of not just taking on their older peers who are better schooled in this combat sport than they are, but also taking on adults who are better skilled in this than they are. And I hope that we cultivate a community and a space that is good sportsmanship and welcoming and a teaching community, so that even though they may not be at the same skill level, then I don't feel completely left out from everything. But still, I mean, we've got everything else going on as a high schooler. Yeah, these kids are heroes to me. I absolutely love them.
I agree. There's some real stellar kids out there. Speaking of which, I had a wonderful extracurriculatory conversation with one of our students about For Honor.
Oh, yes.
And I know you've been digging deep.
I have been working my little tailbone off, trying to get enough of that iron saved up to buy the Sunda character. And I am absolutely in love because my main is Orochi, if I haven't said that before. And Orochi is this extremely fast, kind of dodge-oriented character that relies on a lot of light strikes. But executions are important because they keep the person from being able to be revived. And so being able to finish with an execution is a really important thing to be able to do. So that means you have to finish with a heavy. I don't like the Orochi's heavies because comboing from the light to the heavy with the Orochi feels clumsy. And so it was the one complaint that I've had for Orochi's is not being able to get those executions. And then they released the Sunda, who is also a dodge and evasion specialist but instead of just having this light attack that they can spam from the side, they also have heavies that they can alternate with.
Very strong mix-up game.
Yes. And so I have been absolutely loving the Sunda character because, yeah, it is basically everything that I wanted improved in the Orochi has been in this particular character.
And I think that kind of touches on, like, what we were talking about with real styles reflecting in gameplay choice. I mean, I don't know if I've gone deep into that because that's a game theory type thing, but there's some amazing, you can pick up some amazing things from this ridiculous game that people would not expect, such as my Florentining and berserking nonsense.
Right.
And for you, that is very much one of your styles. You love long two-handed swords, long single weapon, and that the Sunda's blade is very similar to like Min Red or a little over Min Red, and that's your style. So it like clicks for your mind, and I think that makes it adaptable to you.
I think so too. I mean, it's kind of the way that I fight in a lot of ways. A lot of the other characters feel clumsy to me because I don't think in those ways. But they make sense to other people. Obviously, like Lawbringer is a character I struggle against when they're in good hands because that's a good character.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's God, it's just a fun character. Just a fun character because again, if you just I feel like you can just think and then they do what you want them to do.
Yes, and that is like a thing they've been trying to do is like go into these free-flowing, open-ended combos, and that's something you can really achieve with the Sunda. It's like you can make reactive decisions, and I mean one of his biggest problems is how easily he's punished.
Yes.
But if you or how devastating punishes are for him, like his dash heavies, I don't know if you've noticed yet, but his dash heavies, when they get parried, they count as light parries, and that is absolute. I mean, you're eating a heavy against almost every character.
Yeah.
So, but on the other end of it, it's so open-ended. If you can throw out all sorts of different combos and connections and just keep flowing with the character, he's really difficult to read.
And for me, just like with the Orochi, I rely on the counter fighting aspect. I wait for my opponent to do something that provides me an opening, and then I exploit that and try to keep exploiting it until there is no more exploitation to be had.
Truly.
Hopefully, victory has been achieved at that point. Just saying.
Yeah. He has some beautiful victories. I absolutely love all of his executions and his gear.
Yeah.
Fantastic character. Well done.
No, yeah, and yeah, he's fun. He's fun. So yeah, well done, Ferrar. That was an excellent character to add to the game. Has definitely improved my gaming experience. Though I've made a few people rage quit at this point in like duels and stuff.
You grow stronger.
Yes, I feed off their rage, or not.
Don't let it consume you.
You can't. You can't. I mean, and the whole idea, anytime for me, is to maintain a good community. Like after every fight in this, I'm always saying "good match." Like even if I completely devastated the person, the fact that we were there, we were playing the game together, they got a little bit of practice, I got some practice. I consider that a good match. I'm not trying to be condescending or anything like that. I just want to say that.
Yep,
You know?
I'm the same exact way. In fact, I'm like one of those like honor fighters. If we open up a duel, I'm like, good fight, and immediately like do the bow emote and stuff. Even if I lose every time, like I'll still do it.
I will wait. I stance up. Like when the battle goes, I will just stand where I am and stance up and wait. And if my opponent goes into a stance and does the little opening bow or whatever, I will then follow suit because I think it's cool, and I think the animations are really well done. But if they come charging in like some of the gladiator characters like to do, then I'm like, all right, then I'm just sidestepping, and I guess we're going then.
Yep. I'm bad. But see, I guess in a lot of ways, you'll get there. I used to do that, but now I use it as a bait.
Oh yeah.
You'll start to see those guys more and more often, and you'll be like, oh, you'll see the read. They just start moving forward. And bow, and you bow anyways. Boom. And it's like a raider, so you're like ready for that top light.
Right.
And you just go right into it. Bang! You can parry, you can deflect right out of your emote, and it's so punishing. They don't even see it coming. Or for you, you just do the bow, right into the dodge. Yep. And it's demoralizing.
Sure, because I think they're going to get a free hit or two on you, and then you're not there.
Yeah. And you got the good fight in.
I suppose
That's what's worse, because they're like, no, screw that, I'm coming at you, and you're like, oh, cool, whatever, good fight, bro.
Me, bro.
Yeah.
I dig. I like it. But yeah, building that community is huge, and and it's good in everything too. Like Warhammer clubs also kind of rely on the building of community, and so our Warhammer club, the Black Lotus sector here, that a lot of us, it's like a Stygian crossover. There's a lot of us who play Belagarth that kind of got into the Warhammer as well. And War Master Sumatai has been running this tournament for the last several months, and it came to completion. And the last game that we did was the one that I did the other day against Juniper. You will recall Juniper and I talking about that game coming up on our show and looking forward to it. And I told you that I'd let you know what happened. And I want to give another huge shout out to Juniper because she was an excellent opponent. She played her army exceptionally well. And I felt like most of the rounds, the vast majority of the rounds, I had no idea who was going to win. A couple of times I thought she was going to win. It was a very good game. But I ended up winning with a score that I do not believe reflected the difficulty of the game because I scored rather high and she didn't score nearly as high as I thought she just deserved through the sheer effort. But yeah, it was an excellent game, but I won, and yeah, so the tournament is concluded.
Good game. Good
game.
match
Good
all
game.
around.
Yeah, and excellent matches. Like every person I went against, we had some excellent matches. It was a great community building exercise, and yeah. So
love you, Junie.
now it's just back to you haven't seen Juniper in a while, have you?
No.
She misses you too.
I need to give her hugs.
But yeah, so now it's back to ITC prep because I still am determined to go to my first internet ITC tournament somewhere this next year. I need to break onto the scene. I know that I do decently well. I feel pretty good about how I perform here locally, but I'd really like to see how I do against better players. You know.
Yeah, you're ready to hit ranked.
Well, and I don't. I'm not saying that I feel like I'm going to just steal the first tournament that I go into or Mighty Ducks any of this. Like that's not my assumption. But I do have a good grasp of the rules, and I have a good grasp of the way that the game is played. And I'd like to start learning from a wider brand of player. And not to insult the community here in Missoula. I've had some good games at the tournaments that I've been able to attend here, but there's a guy I know named Nick Nadavati. Not that I know, I've never met him, but that I've heard of named Nick Nadavati.
You know of
and other such names. I'd love a rematch with Elrath. He was actually the first, I think he's considered a pro player. I'm pretty sure he's considered a pro player. I know that his wife paints, Sphinx, she paints and makes a living off of painting because she's incredible at it. But one time when we were going down to Battle for the Ring, Elrath was generous enough to host Turkey Feathers and I, and we spent a day playing Warhammer against him. And we each brought an army, and half the day was spent with Turkey Feathers fighting him, and then I fought him. And both times imagine in your mind a young person who has never really been in a fight, who is taking a swing at an Aikido master, and the ease with which that Aikido master sets that youth on the ground in a painful knot. Yes. And you'll have a fairly good idea of how these games went. Because TF and I were both still very young to this game. We were both thinking we were getting pretty good, but we did not have anywhere near the level of mastery that he did. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. I wasn't even mad. I'm just sitting there watching him do it. I'm like, oh man, I can see all my mistakes unfolding before me, but there's nothing I can do about it because he's right there to show me in real time. So yeah, I'm eager to go against other players like that. Other players that I may absolutely get the Jesus whooped out of me, but you learn so much. You learn so much from going against players like that.
Yeah, you're ready to fight some high rep lawbringers who are gonna parry bait you and just punish you for every mistake you make.
Oh, they do too. That's like the one class I struggle against hardcore in Dangdol for Honor is those lawbringers.
You touched upon it, but you didn't describe what your problem was, and then you started talking about this, and that's exactly it right there. Yeah. Same thing. You're ready to get good.
Well, I'm here and I'm eager. Thank you, sir. May I have another? So right before we get to the meat and potatoes of On the March and actually get to the things you guys came to hear us talk about, I'm going to continue playing this little game that we started last time with Juniper, and I'm going to ask Oni, which Chaos God do you think you'd be most likely to be tempted by? Which one could tempt you?
Well, it's a mix for me.
Yeah?
It's a split between two for different reasons. I love Khorne. I love the melee. I'm a melee fiend.
I've seen your fighting. I'm not surprised at his temptation for you.
Right? As much as I love the mindless berserker rage, it gets to me. It gets to me in a way that I don't care for a company, a group that wants to destroy anything so badly that it will destroy itself. That really bums me out.
And they absolutely will. I mean, the World Eaters are fairly well organized, but a lot of times Khorne, they get to the end of battle and they're like, well, we're not done yet. And so they just lay into each other. Of course, orcs do the same thing, and bless their little hearts. We love orcs.
Yeah, truly.
But I can see Khorne's appeal to you, absolutely. Again, being especially the red fighter you are, I'm just picturing you wielding this massive chain glaive.
Oh, thanks, dog.
That's a beautiful image.
It's I love it. I absolutely love it.
But you said you had mixed loyalties here. What other of the
Yes.
Chaos Gods might tempt you?
I like the Nurgle.
Yeah?
You know, and I have I have a little problem with them. They're ugly as sin.
Yes.
But it comes with the territory. I
does.
get it. And I'm okay with... I love the concept that they're all about strength, taking in all... they turn full dark side.
Yes.
They go deeper and deeper into the tunnel, like farther and farther into the unknown, and I like that.
Well, it's immortality.
Yeah, it's their form. Yeah, it's perfect. And I just wish they weren't all boomers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, not all of them are. You've also got the rake thin, corpse walkers and that
yes.
sort of thing, and some of them are blessed with the gift of blotation, is what they call it, but other ones are wasted away, and they get other blessings as well, and that's the way they see it. Again, like we may see a lot of the diseases that they're afflicted with and say, oh, they're suffering from that. But one of the things that Nurgle offers is a freedom from that suffering. You no longer suffer from boils and lesions and madness or blotation or anything like that. Those things become boons. Blutation, that's extra armor, Yep. Those boils and lesions, that's weapons to be used against the opponent. Somebody from Nurgle has a completely different perspective when it comes to this, which is part of the reason they're so alien to somebody who might come from the Imperium, and they're talking to somebody trying to be tempted to Nurgle, and they're like, whoa, you're oozing, dog. Like, why would I want what you've got?
But that's part of the draw to it, that they choose that regardless of all things. They want that strength. They want that.
Some are forced into it.
Yes.
The original, the Death Guard didn't exactly go to Nurgle and be like, you know what, I think we want to do this. Well, some of them did. I'm getting the feeling that Typhon at the time, went and started accepting the gifts, accepted the mark far before Mortarion did. But what actually made Mortarion sacrifice his legion basically to Nurgle was that they were afflicted before reaching Terra by this terrible plague, and they couldn't get out of the warp. And the only way to make it stop was to submit to Nurgle. And I haven't gotten to this part in the book. I hope I'm not spoiling the buried dagger for anybody. But this is also on the Wikipedia, so you know how it happens. You just don't know the deets. Still read the book. I am. But yeah, so they were kind of coerced into it because of this. But there's others who come to it because of that. They come to it because of the blessings that it offers, or because they're already sick and dying, and Nurgle says, I can free you from this. You'll be immortal and live like this forever, but you won't suffer anymore.
It's cool. It's so cool.
So is it just the two, or do you have any others that tempt you as well?
Well, I like the others, but, I'm not as tempted by the magic as much. I love it, but I lose so much melee when I go that route. And I really wish, Khorne had some psychers and stuff.
Yeah, Khorne don't have no psychers.
No, and that's a dang shame.
But Nurgle does.
Exactly. I wish... I'm not versed enough, but I love
There's a concept of Chaos Undivided, but for the purposes of this game, we want you to make a decision.
Well, that's why I'm gonna take the cheater answer.
Okay.
That's it. That's what I want. I want a crossbreed. If there's a character that I think could unite the two, it's Nightmare. And that's what I imagine.
Like Nightmare from Soul Calibur?
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Right? Still the undriving madness, the constant corruption that destroys the body yet makes it stronger and stronger, but still rooted in something, in a way.
And all-consuming rage as well.
Truly. Thirst for souls.
All right. We'll accept that. Panel of judges, yes. Okay, we'll accept that, yeah.
Well, thank you for for accepting my humble, uneducated decision.
All right. Well, what do you say we get into On the March?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm ready as well. So, we're going to be starting with a section that honestly looked like observations around the campfire, or this could also be observations in the registration lobby, or any other place that like teams congregate and gather,
Yeah.
talk. Because Sun Tzu actually proves himself to be an astute. Oh my God, I'm missing the word. Astute observer.
Observationist?
Observer of the human
Observer.
condition.
Observationist.
Observationist. It's a new profession, the observationist. But he proves himself to be a astute observer of the human condition when he was talking about this in the chapter. And in the way that you observe the enemy troops. So this is assuming in real life that you've got spies in position to be able to observe troops in their camp at leisure. This isn't so hard in a game like Belagarth, or I'm sure a game like the SCA or Amtgard or Dagger here, because we travel from camp to camp. I end up in Urukai camp, in Gelf camp, in EBF camp, in BOF camp, in Blackwater camp, in Godsquad camp. Like there's a whole circle that everybody does.
That's how it
And
works.
usually the one person you're looking for is doing the exact same circle, but at the 180-degree angle, so you're just like following each other all night. You find out the next day and they're like, no, I went to those places too. Oh, right after I did. No.
Nightmarish and real curse.
So if you're having trouble finding somebody, just go the other direction. You might find them. But so in this section, he's talking about sometimes some of it has to do with negotiations with diplomats who might come to you with offers of truces, alliances, working together, and some of it has to do with, again, this observation of people at ease in their camps. And this first thing that he talks about, if somebody comes to you with offers of truce, but they don't have any solid commitments to offer you, that often indicates a plot. They're trying to lull you into a false sense of complacency for some other thing that they're maneuvering.
Yeah, trying to soften you in some way, open a hole. If you fall prey to that, per se, I should say. How many times can you say? And
I'm waiting to find out.
but if you go for that blindly, it causes the effect of it's in effect a feint.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
gives a desired stance to your opponent if they fall for such a thing.
True. No, and I've definitely watched it occur as well, where maybe a unit that is decently large, but not large enough to necessarily take on the whole field, will create buffer units. And these buffer units are all units that they have individually said, hey, let's not attack each other until the end to these units, but they haven't told the other units that they've talked to that they've talked to anybody else. Right?
Yep.
So first all these units are killing the units that you haven't made any deals with, either because they don't want to deal with you or you just don't have the connections to make that kind of deal. And then come the end, those units, all thinking that they're honoring their deal with you, attack each other, and then you just have the last one to fight.
Easy. While you're taking a nice breather.
But there's no commitment offered there. You're like, if you're saying we'll just attack each other at the end, what is the commitment to help? You're not saying, oh, I'm going to come to your aid if anything happens before then. You're saying, well, if something happens to you, well, c'est la vie, you died. You're a smaller unit or you're a lesser-known unit. You should just be honored to work with me, sort of thing. But no, like, watch for this. Watch for Greeks and horses and something like that.
A little too real.
So yeah, I've seen this one there too. This is a little bit less applicable for the Warhammer idea because I don't see a whole lot of free-for-alls in a tournament setting. It's usually 2 players, 1v1. And I guess I don't know enough about the actual community to see if this would be applicable. But in other wargaming things, it is. Any place where you've got team-based things, these ideas can come to bear. League of Legends, I think this would be something you could talk about in concerns with that, maybe.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I guess in Warhammer, what if someone was to to be friendly with you, and you guys are playing in a tournament setting. Is it plausible? I mean, I know a couple people that are like this, that are like, hey, I'm gonna play this army. You should play this army so that it's a really good fight, and let's like test ourselves in such a manner. And you're like, okay, sure, totally, because I don't like, like if they use this army, I'm gonna have a hard time with this army, or this, I could try to get by with this setup. Okay, this sounds great, sure. And then they're like, I forgot my other army, or like, I'm just not gonna play that, and you don't even bring yours, and you're like, oh, like, that could be an equivalent style betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, this is just to say that in any time of war, even false war, politics are absolutely a thing. For the longest time, and I've known friends who I've lost because they didn't care for the quote-unquote politics of Belagarth. And here's one thing I'm going to tell you that's the truth. Any human institution has politics. Two,
Yep.
The politics of Belagarth are so true to medieval form, they're probably the most accurate thing about our LARP. Honestly, because, if you look back, one of the things that I've been learning more and more as I've been trying to get more details about the battles that we do for the show is just how much courtly intrigue plays in these wars.
It's unreal.
It's huge, and so these little comings and goings, these seemingly insignificant acts and words that take place in these high elite places, they actually mean something. These observations can, again, dictate the course of the battle and the battlefield. Like I've seen where you'll have two units that are working decently together. I'm not going to name names, but I've definitely seen where two units have been used to working together, and they've got two members, one in each unit, who are involved romantically. And then something happens between those two people, and perhaps it gets ugly. Those two units are now diametrically opposed to one another. And that doesn't just change the dynamic for those two units, it changes the dynamic for the entire field.
It's nightmarishly real.
So to know these things is to be able to predict what's going on. I'm not saying being a gossip monger. I'm just saying keep your ears open. Observe what's going on. And again, if somebody does not have any real commitment, don't believe any offers of truce, or at least don't really sell into it. The next thing he talks about has to deal with the leadership, and it says that officers, if you find them to be irritable, that they are the exhaustion is setting in. And that exhaustion can either be physical exhaustion just from being on the field too long, or it can also be mental exhaustion from drama within the unit. That can be very taxing on a unit leader because it's strange. Most unit leaders are elected with the idea that they're going to be a tactical leader, right? Mm-hmm. But 90% of their job is managing the interpersonal BS of the unit. I'm sure Thumbs could back me up on this. He's been a leader a couple of times.
It's very real. I mean, that's very real in a lot of leadership positions. It requires you to have this kind of experience and this kind of mind to do basic checks. Make sure this doesn't happen. Make sure this happens. Make sure this goes the right way.
Right.
But then everything surrounding that, within that, is all about extra stuff, is all about the mindset, what's going on with the enemy, like what's all the minutia that plays into those strategies, that affects those strategies. And if you're not paying attention to it, you're not paying attention to your men, not paying attention to their men, it's an edge lost. It's information. It's they're
Sometimes winning a battle comes down to HR.
Truly. Thank you.
Nobody likes the HR department, and yet they're the ones who help mitigate all the circumstances. So you can see this in a couple of ways, though. Officers, and I'm using officers to mean influential people within realms or units, they will start doling out rewards arbitrarily for seemingly no reason. There's no structure to it, and also punishments might seem cruel, disproportionate, or also random at the same time. There doesn't seem to be any order to it, and this all indicates that there is a disruption at the leadership level. And if there is a disruption at the leadership level, that is one thing that trickles down. We try not to get political on this show, but that is one thing that trickles down.
Huge. You can just talk about work. When the manager is no good,
Oh yeah,
there's problems.
Yes. Because they
Guaranteed.
pass that on to everybody else that they deal with. So, yeah, that's a huge indicator. If you're sitting there around the campfire or going to pub night and you're noticing that the officers of a particular unit are behaving in this exhausted way or doling out punishments and rewards seemingly at random or for no reason, that's an indication that unit or realm might be suffering somewhat. That affects the performance on the field of battle. The next thing he says is extremely similar, but it's the lower echelon. It says clusters of folk whispering together indicates dissatisfaction. And this is not, people who have gone off to the side to discuss where they're going to go next to party or whatever like that. But I've entered camps where everybody's sitting at least near the fire, and there's this openness to the atmosphere. The whole thing is open and inviting. Everybody is kind of chatting amongst each other, even if they're kind of sitting in a group. They'll lean over and talk to their neighbors. Mm-hmm. Like there's this whole communal, nice atmosphere. Like every Dark Angels camp that I've had the pleasure of going to has been like this, where everybody's just there and together, and you don't have this dissatisfaction that's just palpable. But then there's other camps, I don't want to name names, but that I've gone into, and you can just kind of feel it because everybody's clustered in these little groups, and they're not speaking very loudly. There's nothing really communal going on, and every time you approach a group, they kind of get quiet, and perhaps don't want you to hear what they're talking about. This is a bad sign. This is a very bad sign to see in somebody's camp.
It's... I'm going to use one of my standard catchphrases. Too real. It's
too real.
It's terribly, disheartening, and it's very easy to see. It's like, it's so, once you understand like that those things are happening and those social connections like mean something, when these groups, that means it shows their distrust even for each other.
Right.
And when you walk in and you feel that and you see that and you walk up to groups and they kind of shudder as you say and are like, oh, hey, and everybody just stops talking about what they're saying and they immediately address you, either to pull you in to the dissatisfaction or
right.
to push you away from it.
Or to try to act like nothing's going on. You've definitely seen that too, where somebody suddenly, they're just like forcing strange conversation. And it's like, this has nothing to do with what you were just talking about, and you're just like trying to basically throw people off the scent as to what you're saying. Any of this, again, these all can be bad signs that a unit or a realm could be in trouble.
Thank you for the perfect option C.
There's always a third option.
Always. At least.
Speaking of third options, that was the third option. We're moving on to the fourth option. For this particular section. On the opposite side of people coming and offering nothing, and not really trusting that, if people come with really soft conciliatory words, and by conciliatory words I mean that they're willing to negotiate, they're willing to concede, that means that they are keen on a truce, and that's something that absolutely should be grabbed upon. But like we were saying earlier, a true concession would be if you are in danger on the field, we will come to your aid and you will come to ours. That sort of thing is an actual concession, an agreement to action, and not just, non-aggression till the end, because again, if you see that all over the place, you've got dishonesty. But if you've done that, and you've made a truce that says, I'll come to your aid, people are going to find you out very quickly because you're going to be like, why are you attacking me? Because I'm attacking this other person. You just killed them both, and that's really confusing, and blood for the blood god. Am I right?
Truly.
But nobody's really going to want to work with you after that, and so for this to be worthwhile, the truces have to also be genuine and consistent, because word gets around if somebody is dishonest. So you want people to be able to take you at your word. At least I want people to be able to take me at my word. That's an important thing for me.
I play by that rule as well. It's just not... You just besmirch your fighting character so hard when you make those kinds of deals and turn on people. It does not make friends.
No. Yeah, and it can make grudges. And grudges are a dangerous thing in a community that is I mean, it's an international community. I know I've said before that it's all across the United States, but I'd failed to mention that we actually have a couple of realms in Puerto Rico,
Canada.
Germany, Canada. Yeah, we're all over the place, and so even though we have people in all these places, it's still a small community. You still only have a certain number of people who are movers and shakers, because the vast majority of people are just there to have a good time. They're just there to enjoy wacky bats with their friends. Some of them may listen to this show, in which case I don't judge you. I'm one of you for most of the time. I only get involved in politics when absolutely necessary. But if you mess over somebody in one section of the community, people talk. And maybe later in life, when you're wanting to do something, or you're wanting to press forward with some initiative within the community, you might find resistance because you don't have a good rep.
And it doesn't go unnoticed.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. So, these are things to consider in this case as well. Honestly, a little bit of subterfuge isn't bad, but also don't be dishonest. There's ways to engage in subterfuge without being dishonest. But yeah, and so the rest of this portion of Sun Tzu's chapter, he spends talking a lot about how to judge the discipline of a unit and how that discipline relates to their performance on the battlefield. And this is a part that I honestly take issue with, at least when it comes to something like Belegarth, because there are units that I've seen that are highly disciplined, like you would see in a military sense. They get up, they have people who might even be considered drill sergeants, they run drills together as a unit. They're highly organized, there's meetings that are compulsory, like it almost seems like an entirely different job. But that's the way that they choose to win things, and those units might perform very well. But counter to that, I wish I could say that like high discipline, and I mean I was in the army. I know what that lifestyle is like, and I definitely digged it when I was a part of it. Digged it, dug it, dug it, dig it, dug it.
Dug it indeed, dug it indeed.
But I've also seen units that do not operate on that principle at all. It almost seems like pure chaos to anybody from the outside. It almost looks like the unit is about to implode, at least from a discipline standpoint. And then you go and watch them in tournaments. And then you see them form up on the field for battle, even though you're sitting there and you swear because of the wizard staff they were wielding the night before that they should not be walking right now. They are still miraculously there and slaying on the field. I might be talking about God Squad.
Wizards.
And it just impresses me. It impresses me because that extreme opposite paradigm also exists and also works exceptionally well, And so looking at these two things, I think you just need to have people who are on the same page. If you've got people who are into partying and who don't necessarily want to have schedules and practice together, then you also need people who practice on their own. Every God Squad member I've talked to says that they have a home practice regimen they engage in. Some sort of Pell work or exercise or forums or YouTube watching or something like that helps them keep their practice up. Even just sparring constantly. So it's not that they're not practicing, it's not that they're not drilling, they just do so on an individual level. Other units make it a community activity, and so it really comes down to who is in the unit and how is that unit going to function well together. Because if you have some undisciplined people who are not going to push themselves, who are not going to try to better themselves in their off time, then you're just kind of hanging out. Because then there's no time to improve, but the improvement needs to come from somewhere. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I kind of disagree with Sun Tzu in this sense, because there are highly effective units that would have, from the outside point of view, no overarching theme of discipline,
But that just speaks to its existence in the first place. It wouldn't exist if it didn't work in some capacity. And that is, I agree with you 100%. I think that's a conflict of style.
Right.
That's just not, it rubbed his for the wrong way.
Well, because I know that, like, for instance, God Squad, since we're talking about you cool guys right now anyways, I know that a lot of members of God Squad would not do well in some of the other more, like, highly disciplined units that I know of, just because it's just not their personalities.
Yeah.
They would not click with the strictures of that kind of life. And vice versa, there's some people in some highly disciplined units that would not do well in a place that didn't have that kind of structure.
100%.
So it's nice that those the different units exist for different types of people. And so when we're saying on this show, like I say sometimes, that the Dark Angels are kind of typecast, I don't mean to say that we're all the same body type, we all think the same way about politics, we all agree about everything all the time. I'm just saying that when you're looking on the field at somebody, there's a certain way that we want a Dark Angel to move, because we don't get together and do mass drills for the most part. Like sometimes we do. It'll be like a fun communal activity right after morning yoga and, group church and that sort of thing. But it's not a strict thing. It's not, every single Saturday of this event we're always doing this. So and the reason that can work is because we select people who are already working on their own. We select people who are individual, maybe self-starters would be the business term for it. And yeah, so that's how maybe a more disorganized organization can function.
In 100%. Following that same theme of reorganizing this, naturally, I think the next step, which is what we've already been talking about, is observations on the field.
Oh, of like the behaviors of units and teams on the field? Yeah. I think that's a good idea. So yeah, these same observations, Sun Tzu offers this same idea, and again, a lot of this section is spent with him talking about the actual organization of the unit, the way their drums and banners are arrayed, and where their officers are moving, and some units, a lot of units that are decentralized. Again, Dark Angels, God Squad, I think Blackwater come to mind very strongly for a decentralized unit, one that like doesn't have like a designated chain of command that is always obeyed on the field of battle. They wouldn't match what Sun Tzu is saying here. Again, they're effective. They get things done in their own way, but that particular section doesn't apply, I don't think. So, but the things that do apply, if another unit or another team gets close to you, but avoids attacking you, they are confident in their position, is basically the idea. They believe that their position is unassailable, and that if they kind of stay there, you're going to come to them, and that they are going to win.
It's almost a bait.
It is. There's definitely a posturing, and there's another one later on that actually is a bait, and that's. But these are guys who are getting, again, they're close, but they're not necessarily attacking. They want you to initiate, because again, they're confident that they can win, but they don't want to necessarily come to you.
Such as within view, or the most logical marching path,
Right.
within, or directly in the way of. Yeah, it absolutely is a huge thing, especially on the battlefield, if you see a powerful force standing there in front of you, just lining up in front of you, and then just marches forward and plants, like, what they're thinking.
Yep. They're thinking, you will break upon me. Or even just a fighter that's standing between you and the objective. Think a ring the bell. And this is a game type. I know we don't necessarily explain a lot of this stuff as well as we should, because Kaji and Oni and I have been doing this for a long time.
It's a classic slip up.
Yeah.
Season 1 slip up.
He was even on the show, which makes it
No, that's why. We're brothers in arms for sure. Often misnamed. Sorry.
I mean, when I first met you guys, you were together so often that I literally had trouble remembering which one was which.
And the problem was that was our goal.
Well, it worked. It definitely
did.
Worked. But we've been doing this a while, and so some things that we're talking about might make sense to people who are very experienced, but to somebody who doesn't necessarily know the lingo or hasn't been around as long, it might not be common knowledge. So I think it's good for us to, explain sometimes what we're talking about.
Yeah, good call. Good move. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
So, Ring the Bell is a game type where you've got two teams, and you either can have it ongoing or it end when the bell is rung. But each team has a bell, quote unquote bell, that is a shield that is placed on their side of the field, and the objective is to go over and hit the other person's bell, ring the bell, as it were.
Ding.
So, what I'm saying here is that if somebody is standing directly in front of you, they plant, and again, immediately right in front, that is an indicator that they are confident in their position and they want you to approach. Along this same vein of thought, if they are further away, but they are taunting you in some way, they're trying to bait, they're sending people out to like come and try you and then like fall back to that position, that is an obvious bait. That is a lure. They're trying to get you into position so that they can do something else. And actually both of these things I've honestly seen in 40K as well. You have this unit that like comes chomping up right in front of you and they plant. Again, they want you to assault them there. They're there for a reason. It's not by coincidence. Most of the time. Sometimes people make mistakes, but it's never to your benefit to assume that somebody is making a mistake. You should always assume that it's intentional. At least that's what chess taught me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything, the preparation for a negative side effect will have you more ready, rather than if you don't pay heed. The consequences are far often more dire.
And then, if again, in the same way, if you've got your units arrayed in the back and they're far off, but they're issuing this challenge, they're like throwing out those shots and like not necessarily coming towards you, they want you to come towards them. It's part of a larger plan to perhaps encircle or hit you with a secondary attack of some sort. And then progressing from that same idea, if they foam up post from you. Again, we're talking close, but they're really loud. Be aware of a trap. And this is one that I have absolutely seen on the Battlefield. You come to mind. Angus comes to mind for people who are excellent distractions, who can just run up into somebody's face and be making all sorts of noise, and suddenly the flanker hits.
Yeah.
Or even somebody from just like another angle, just that level of loudness, be ready for it.
That's 100.
And it's interesting that Sun Tzu even takes the time to address this. He addresses this specifically because, again, and I started in the SCA. I was only a part of the SCA for like a brief second. I went to the local realm here, Sentinel's Keep, and I had my bell rung once, and determined that I did not want to do anything that hard anymore because it
will break you down.
It was loud. I was wearing a helmet, and but it was hit with rattan, and it was loud, and it impacted it. Like I'm like, you guys do this, okay? But I did go to an event it was called what was it? The Griffin's Fury or something like that. It escapes me now.
I can't even try to help on this.
But it was a clash between the unit or the group here and a Canadian group. And walking on the battlefield afterwards, it was carnage. I mean, it was like I had elected to be a water boy, and so like, but walking on that battlefield afterwards, it was just strewn with men who were in these armor, and they had their helmets off because it was really hot. They're like crying out for water, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hardcore. But all of that aside, they would really, really use this tactic where they would get in each other's faces and get super loud while they had guys that were really pushing the sides. Like it was, and with all that armor on, to get loud, they had to get real loud. So, yeah, it works. It absolutely works.
Not to give away my totally obvious trade secrets, but I absolutely have a super loud voice, and I've had to learn to control that. But in these situations, I learned to control it in a different way, and it is an incredible factor. I've literally watched people die because of a battle cry.
Right.
And that is not an exaggeration. It sounds like a far-fetched tale, but when you roll up against a group of 4 people that have not learned to not flinch yet, a giant 8-foot red user that is key-opping in your face so loud that it is like a shock bang, you're done. It's crazy how hard people will tense up, and that's even if that's a metaphor. Like, that brings such a presence to an area that it forces people to pay attention.
Oh yeah. Again, like a loud noise nearby, unless people are very disciplined, it will. I mean, even then, they're going to have a modicum of like, what was that? Like, it's great. It's a great, not just distraction, but also it puts people off guard. Like you said, I've definitely seen people like soften their stance or like drop their stance because they're like, what? And then boom, they're dead.
Spearmen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it can absolutely be used as a weapon. So next, after you've made your observations, move around the campfire, and now we've made our observations about the field itself and the people who are forming up. We're going to be talking about moving around the field, and Sun Tzu talks about 4 very real features in the book in the forms of mountains, rivers, salt marshes, and level ground. And of course, all of these can be taken literally as well. But what we're going to kind of focus on is the metaphoric meaning of these particular geographic features, as they are in most fields, because most fields don't have actual salt marshes, or at least we try to avoid that. And we're not actually playing in real rivers. But again, metaphorically, I honestly think that these apply. So a mountain is obviously any sort of raised area, but it can also be any fortified area, like with hay bales or even wooded areas. These can be considered a quote-unquote mountain. And he says that you need to pass by mountains. You need to stay in the valleys, which is to say, stay kind of like going between these mountains, and never join a battle on higher ground. This is absolutely true. Attacking uphill, not a great idea. At that same SCA tournament that I was at, I watched a lone man run up the hill toward the Canadian shield line. And he was so peppered by javelins. Like, I think the force of them actually drove him backwards. Like, it was one of those things where he was sprinting forward full tilt, and then he went backwards from all these javelins hitting him.
Ouch.
It was beautiful.
That's a lot of physics going on.
It was. A lot of force and mass. Perhaps momentum was involved.
Yeah, not only momentum, but the complete stopping and reversal of...
Yeah, when 2 forces collide, and one of them is a wall of javelins. So a mountain it can be absolutely higher ground, but again, it can also be a very well-entrenched unit, a unit that has a very good shield wall that would be difficult to break. That could also be considered a mountain.
Don't try to climb that.
Don't try to climb that. At least not until the end. And we're talking about unit battles or multi-team fights where you've got a lot of people moving around and a lot of things to consider. So this is what we're talking about by a mountain. If it's just 2 teams, they're a little bit different to talk about.
As well as the edge of the world.
Yes, yeah, that was the other analogy that we definitely wanted to draw, was the idea that the mountains are the edge of the world, and you should never necessarily be right up against them. Stick to the valleys. It's not a bad idea to be near the mountain, but just not right up against the mountain in this particular way. The next thing he talks about is the river, and again, on most battlefields, you're not going to have an actual river. Sometimes there might be a river that is kind of like RP'd or something like that. But the river we're talking about is just the metaphoric space between units. Especially if you're talking about 2 powerful units, or even like the center of the field where all these units are looking, the river can be considered this, because of the way that these analogies work. Because Sun Tzu says that you should cross the river and move away from it very quickly. Don't tarry in the river. And if your enemy is coming across the river, do not meet them midstream, which is to say, if they're coming across the open area, don't go into the open area to meet them, but wait until half of them have fully crossed and then plow into them. Because, in this particular case, the ones who are not across the river at that point, A lot of unit battles, if another unit smells blood, they're going to come in. And who are they going to go against? The team that has had their back against the mountains and is attacking the team midstream, or the team that is midstream, which is the easier pickings?
Oh, definitely the one that is harder to get to and fortified and whooping the other team. They're gonna go for them, right?
I sense sarcasm, and yes. But yeah, so this is the idea of rivers, and I like this analogy so much. I teach this one all the time to our students, and it heartens me because often, and they've taught it to others now. I hear like generations of them who haven't been through the officers' academy yet, yelling at somebody else, "Hey, dude, get out of the river!" And it's beautiful because what they're saying is, "Hey, get out of the middle, hey, get to safety, and not in that transitory place between places in the unit battle."
It's so real to see on a big two-sided line. You can watch it organically move, and it is so applicable to line fighting. When you see a fighter step out into that gap and try to not push through with cohorts as a line, but to try to cross the river and fight his way across the other side, it is a death wish.
Oh yeah.
It
Yeah.
will get you killed. The whole point is that you break through.
Yes.
You go all the way across. As he said, do not stop. There's no reason to try to get into a tussle in the river.
Nope.
Because you're going to get hit by everyone around. And exactly that on the opposite end. If you're getting pushed and they make a line push, hold your ground and drop them there. Drop them at the edge of the river. Wait until half of them, as said, a huge majority of them, is crashing and dying against your line, and then push.
Mm-hmm.
And don't hang out. Crush it. Boom. Push through exactly in the same manner. Break it down and get across to the other side.
That's right. Yeah, and so again, don't linger there, but use it to your advantage when you're being attacked from there, because it's risky. It's risky to mount an attack from the river. So yeah, that's the analogy that we use for that one. The next one is a salt marsh, and for this analogy, imagine an area where there is intermittent, disorganized, and sparse fighting. And to get bogged down there, tracking down the various people who may be engaged in combat and trying to defeat them, is literally just going to do that. It's going to bog you down and keep you from being able to maneuver on other elements that might be using you being in the salt marsh as a reason to attack.
I am very, very guilty of this one.
Of lingering in the salt marsh?
Yes. As a
Leg 'em and leave 'em, Odin. Just hack those reeds and move through.
Oh, I know. Oh, man. Oh, it's so bad. I'm so bad. It's just the worst. I see people out there skirmishing. I'm support. I'm DPS. I want to save my teammate, and I want to wreck the other one. And I so easily, just as my meta type, and it just pulls me in every time. I'm like, sorry guys, gotta go save my friend.
And then you get stuck in the salt marsh as well.
Or I get left behind.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my unit that I'm fighting with is 60 feet off in a full battle, and first of all, I'm not there.
Right.
I'm way at a higher chance of getting mowed upon behind or from the side, and my whole team doesn't have me now.
Right.
And I'm missing the main battle.
Yep. So yeah, these smaller little battles, even if it's one of your teammates, like Oni's saying, or if it's like two other teams that are kind of engaging sparsely. And again, I'm not talking about a dedicated line hit. I'm talking about these little tiny fights that aren't worth necessarily mopping up when there's larger players that are at work.
Truly.
Is kind of the idea. So yeah, do not get bogged down in the salt marsh. Cross it quickly and do not linger. And then level ground. He talks about the best place to be because the field itself might be able to be considered level ground. Or at least most cases we try to make the field as level as possible. I've been on some fields where there's like hills and stuff, and they're pretty cool. But for the most part, there's a lot of level ground. When you're forming up, it is best to keep the quote-unquote mountains, air quote mountains, to your back and to your right. Now, when I first read this, and Sun Tzu said this, he says it's for the best defense of your men, and it enables you to be able to move out with the best cover, basically. And I'm sitting there thinking about it, I'm like, that makes no sense. You're wide open if you line up that way, because I am a left-handed person. And if I were to line up that way, my whole left side is exposed to the rest of the field, and I feel very in the open. But as most fighters, and especially fighters who are trained for these armies, were right-handed, that was a totally different ballgame, because the shield is on that left-hand side. So you've got really good defense toward the rest of the field. So this is something to consider if you. And now, I don't want every field, every team in Belagarth now fighting over the extreme right-hand corner of every match. But if you can maneuver it, it's apparently a good thing for y'all right-handed fighters.
And even on the microchasm, that sounds like a totally made-up combination of words.
No, microcosm's a real word.
Okay, okay. I'll take a 10th of % credit for that one. Fighting with a shieldman, fighting with a mobile mountain, you absolutely want to be on their mountainside. You want to be fighting on the shield side. If you're fighting with a left-hander, you want to be on their right side.
Yep.
They're protecting your flank. And if you're fighting with a righty, same thing. You want them on your right, and that's what he's talking about. You want the mountains to your right and behind you. And, I don't necessarily want a shieldman behind me, but I sure do if they're going to watch my back.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, and so that's the whole idea with what he said here. And so the idea is just to line up and to make sure that when you're moving, you're doing so in the best defensive way possible. You're trying to keep whatever side of your army, if you're moving as one group, that is defensive toward the enemy soldiers so that you remain protected. I notice that most toilet bowls, as we call it, and this is another term that I need to explain. Toilet bowl of death is when one unit moves against another unit who starts backing away into another unit, who starts backing into another unit, who starts backing into another unit, and then everybody's moving in the same direction, and it just toilet bowls. As you can imagine it.
Oh, it's so real.
Yeah.
Everyone is so afraid of each other.
But do you notice that it usually goes counterclockwise?
Yep.
Because everybody is moving away and keeping their shields to the team that is advancing to their left.
Yep. And throwing their offense out.
Yep. Which again makes no sense to me as a lefty. I'm like, why are we going this way? Come on.
Which is nice because I like people that stop the flush. It drives me mad. I want to fight someone. I do not want to fight someone that is running away from me. It kills
I
me.
didn't come here to walk in circles.
No.
That's not what I traveled. However many hours that we had to get out of Montana to walk in circles. So yeah, so that's moving through. That's a little bit of advice just for thinking of the field in a bit more of a dynamic fashion, and really concentrating on making sure that you minimize your time in threat areas and maximize the time that you keep your opponent in those threat areas. Yeah. So, this battle, super surprise battle, unless you've got something else to add on that real quick. Yeah.
I'll just say it now. I'll leave it as a anecdote for
Alright.
later. If people are interested, they can comment, whatever. That is a parallel to the zone of sanctity that I have never thought about before.
Zone of Sanctity.
Yes. And then I will.
Now, you got me curious now. We'll hold off on the battle. You got to explain this now.
Okay.
Zone of Sanctity.
Zone of Sanctity. 8-way movement.
Okay.
Forward, back, left, right, and each diagonal.
Sure.
For a right-handed fighter, it is the exact directions of the mountain. It is reverse right.
Right.
It is the polar opposite direction of their weapon hand.
Sure.
If they're left-handed, you move away from the opposite.
Right.
Ooh, as I move farther away from the target.
So quiet.
But that's, as a red fighter, for example, or a polearm fighter, you always want to backstep away from their weapon, boom, boom, while attacking.
Right.
Maximizes your chance for successful damage.
Yep.
And minimizes your threat. Same direction. Never thought about that.
Zone of sanctity. Learned a new term today. All right, so I'm going to preface this battle for y'all. The reason we're keeping it a secret is because every year that we have done gladiators, the battles that we've done at the end of these shows are very similar to the way we've done the class, because we do the class and we teach, we go through the passages of the book, kind of explain how they apply to Warhammer or to Belagarth. And then when we get to the end, we've thought of a battle that we put them into a scenario, and we don't necessarily tell them anything about it because we don't want them to know the right way to get out of it. If I tell them, okay, you're doing the Battle of Adrianople, then maybe one of them might get on his phone, because that's what kids can do, and be like, okay, how did such and such general win the Battle of Adrianople? Okay, we do this, and I don't want any of that happening. So we obscure the names, we obscure the location, we just give them the bare facts that they need to kind of understand the situation occurring in the battle. And in this particular, and a lot of times they win, especially as the year goes on. They start getting closer and closer, and then actually maybe winning some of these battles because they're thinking more tactically.
It's awesome to see.
But I have never had a class pass the battle that we're about to present to you.
Not once.
Not once. It is the Kobayashi Maru of the of the gladiator program, so to speak. So, the setting. There is an empire. Let's say it's an empire of orcs that is spreading into this area of plains that has been long occupied by elves. Now, these elves have lived in different groups, in different family groups, but this area has been largely theirs for hundreds of years. They have been unchallenged. They have been unfettered by any law. But the discovery of resources valuable to the orcs have brought them in pursuit of this territory. Now, the orcs have shown that they have underestimated their foe. In an initial encounter that was supposed to go exceptionally easy, the orcs were bested by these elves.
What? But greenskins are best.
That's what this empire says, but apparently not. And they were bested, and the general was nearly destroyed. They were driven back, and so a while later, these orcs decide that they're going to send in a better idea. They assemble a few more men, and we're talking somewhere around the tune of like 2,000 troops to go into this area, because the assumption is that these tribes, as they have long lived, are in disparate groups. They don't really move together. They move in small kind of war bands, and they don't come together. They're not expecting to encounter any more than 800.
It's a strong tactic. Keeps them safe, keeps them separated, hard to track down, hard to pin down.
So the orcs aren't expecting much resistance. What they don't know is that these tribes of elves have banded together for their own protection and are operating in such a way that they are tracking the orcs' every movement. So the orcs move into this area between a very large river and a mountain range. Now, they decide that they're going to split up into several different groups. And the reason for this is that one is going to move a little bit closer to the mountain range, one is going to move closer to the river, and then once one of the groups engages them, that's going to make them flee, and the other group will move in and pin them, and then that will be that.
And worst case scenario, they'll be ready for skirmish.
Right.
Which has been the normal way that it's rolled up until this point. I mean, they're using their previous knowledge to their advantage, but they're letting their emotions of the previous defeat get to them.
And the orcs aren't researching their opponent. Remember that these orcs are coming through, and they're just sort of assuming their superiority over these elves. They're just assuming that they're going to beat them.
Horde wins. Greenskins are best.
That's right. Horde wins.
We have nothing to learn from this.
And in particular, one of these orc commanders is a real loudmouth. He has made enemies among his fellow officers for his shameless self-promotion. He was a hero in a previous war against some other treacherous orcs that betrayed the cause. He proved himself a massive hero, and so he came into this particular conflict expecting to be received and adored as the hero he was. He would often punish officers who did not think that he was as cool as he is. This is a very orc tactic that shouldn't surprise anybody.
No.
And he's the orc that we're going to be talking about today. Because, honestly, he was following orders in this particular case, but the elves had been watching him, and they had been learning from him. And they had seen that in previous engagements, he had sent in a loud and boisterous force to the front of a elvish encampment. All of the elvish warriors would come out and engage that distraction force that at this point had become very well embedded. And then this commander would go around the flank into the elvish encampment, take all the women and children hostage, and demand that the braves lay down their weapons. So, he thought that this was a pretty clever plan. But the elves were wise to him. And so when he sent one of his lessers to do this distractionary force, now this is of course one of the lessers that had offended him. He hadn't particularly lived up to the bootlicking expectations that his commander had.
His skin was not so green.
His skin was not so green. And so he was sent in, but he was overwhelmed almost immediately by far more elves than they had even anticipated. So he fights his way back to the side of the river, and they keep coming, and he keeps fighting his way back to a hill, and he takes massive losses throughout this entire process. But as he was supposed to be there as the distractionary force, the greenest of greenskins was moving around to the flank to do his traditional hostage snatch maneuver.
Foolproof plan.
What he did not know was that the commanders of the elves were wise to him, and then they had a sizable force ready. The battlefield afterwards showed that they died running away from a far superior force. Yeah, it was absolutely devastating. And what happened here was that this particular commander committed the cardinal military sin. If there was to say one cardinal military sin, it is this. It is rushing in without knowing the numbers or the location of your opponent. Would you disagree, Oni? So
how can I?
How can you? It's true. So, has anybody guessed what this battle we might be referring to is? I'll give you a hint. It occurred in 1876. Anybody? Well, the next hint would be that it occurred in May of 1876 in the United States. The name of the battle was the Battle of the Greasy Grass, also known as Custer's Last Stand, also known as the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And everything I said there about the greenest of the greenskins was absolutely true. He was a shameless self-promoter. He actually wrote about the tactic of running in and seizing women and children and making the brave surrender in his book about his life on the plains. He had upset the people around him. He was moving under orders. There's this assumption that he was in the area and completely off the handle, but he wasn't. This was just the plan that was assumed because there wasn't supposed to be as many Native Americans there as there were. It was supposed to be 800, but conservative estimates place it anywhere between 2,500 and 6,000. So that again, you have basically the entirety of the Sioux Nation bearing down upon you there. And not only that, but they were being commanded by Crazy Horse and Gall, two of the best commanders that the Sioux Nation had ever seen, and brilliant tacticians when it came to the wars that occurred on the plains.
And I'm going to follow the theme. Terrible. It's not a theme at all. But it happened once. I'm going to offer the third option to further the mistake that was made. He not only attacked blindly in location and numbers of troops, he relied upon a negative moral compass to defeat these enemies, and that brought them together to band against this, what was obviously a terrible force.
Well, it's definitely part of it. I mean, this large a city, mobile city for the most part, that had come together were people who wanted to attend the Sundance, which they were forbidden from doing if they went to the reservation, and so they were resisting that and trying to stay together for safety. Again, it was not usual for them. They usually moved in far smaller groups, but that meant being picked off by the U.S. cavalry.
I had no idea that it was a Sundance. That is incredible. That is a double whammy, especially because now not only are they like, oh man, ooh, it's almost unintentional moral compass like fighting. If they didn't even mean to, yet they were brought together by a moral compass of oppression to begin with.
Right.
Which is why they were there, and then it came straight into their face, like straight in there, and they were, dang,
Well, and this
no
particularly
idea.
was because gold had been found in the Black Hills.
Yep.
And there had already been a lot of incidents between natives who said, hey, this is ours because of the treaties, and settlers saying, no, this is ours because we say so. And so the U.S. Army had been called to solve the situation, of course, on the side of the settlers who were stealing land. But yeah. And so that was that battle. And again, every time we phrased it, we get to the end of it and we say, yeah, you, like, because each of the kids would be playing a certain general. One of them would be Reno. One of them would be Crazy Horse. One of them would be Custer. And so we'd say, hey, bud, you were playing Custer, and guess what?
Every time.
So yeah, that and I think that's a very good lesson for just about everything we've said before as well. Like never another one of Custer's big mistakes was he did the same thing over and over and over again. And of course, somebody as smart as Crazy Horse is going to see that and say, "Hey, I bet he's going to pull the same stuff," and he did. And so they were able to redirect and hit him hard.
Let him kidnap us.
But again, these are the finest warriors in the Sioux Nation. And not just that, but they were newly outfitted. They had just gotten a bunch of new rifles from various raids and trades that they have done. And so it was not a force that they were expecting. And they didn't listen. Like their Crow scouts reported, they were like, there's a huge settlement up ahead. You can't take it. And still Custer was like, I shall attack. Because that was just...
Greenskins are best.
Well, he wanted to renew his reputation. Like he felt like his reputation was sagging so much. He was no longer a Civil War hero, which he was. Actually, there was a large sweeping maneuver that Jeb Stuart did during the Battle of Gettysburg that Custer was instrumental in stopping. And if Jeb Stuart had managed to get between the Army of the Potomac and Washington, that would have been a huge issue and would have caused the Federals to have to withdraw from their defensive positions to deal with it. So the fact that Custer did that earned him a lot of fame and respect. Now, everything else he did was absolutely deplorable, but...
Just goes to some people's heads.
It does. It does. Fame does go to people's heads. So yeah, that's been our episode on the march. We've been talking about observations you can make around camp, about your enemies or nobody's the enemies in these communities, but your opponent's dispositions, observations that can be made on the field, then moving around the field and kind of how to think about that in terms of what is dangerous and what is not, and then giving a decent example of everything not to do with the Battle of the Greasy Grass. So yeah,
Nailed it.
If you're liking what we're doing, if you're enjoying this show and it's bringing some joy to your life or some knowledge to your noggin, please like us on Facebook, or like us on whatever podcasting service you go to, and review us. Any of that stuff gets us more bumps. It gets us more views and can enable us to do more. We also have an Instagram account, Art of Wargaming Podcast. Is just the handle there, and you can see us there. I'm always trying to post pictures of battles and the armies and some of the Stygian life that occurs around here. You can see the various goings on around the studio, my living room of recording. You can find us on Facebook, The Art of Wargaming. We love getting messages.
Please.
And come check out what we're doing there. You can reach us at email, if you like, artofwargamingpodcast@gmail.com. Send us pictures of your LARPing gear or of your battle gear. Send us pictures of your armies. Give us some reviews, some creative feedback. If you'd like to hear something else on the show, we'd love to hear it. Next week, we're going to be talking about terrain, which is honestly one of my favorite chapters. I say that every time.
Nothing wrong with that.
It is one of my favorite. I do love it.
It's like one of those. It's like a good album where you love every single song.
Yeah, like every Tool album. But until next week, I think this is Yagama Lark
And Onishiro.
signing off.